Welcome to Digging into the Future. Today we've got Gautam Bhandari from I² Capital, one of the great investors right now across our sector, who's been very active over the last, I would say, a few years in terms of buying assets, anything from GTT to some of the Hutchison assets to some of the great fiber assets and then I guess most recently Trans-Pacific cable system as well. So welcome to Digging into the Future.
Thank you very much, Bill.
Give us a quick, so you were originally a Morgan Stanley guy, right?
20 years ago I joined Morgan Stanley. 12 years ago we set up I² Capital.
Okay, all right. And how big's I² now?
So I² today is about $38 billion in capital, 260 odd employees. We are present in about 81 countries, 75 plus assets.
What's the if I was to pick the 5 biggest assets, which would you say the 5 largest ones that you're invested in?
Well, in digital infrastructure we own EXA, which is the large fiber, terrestrial fiber and some subsea cables all over Europe. We bought Hutchison Global's assets in Hong Kong. We have Lightstorm, a self-built asset that we did in India, then expanded to Indonesia, Thailand, and other geographies. And then, of course, data centers. We own Mexico's largest data centers. We own a big asset in Asia, BDX, and so lots of assets. But frankly, digital is not all we do. We own a lot of power assets, a lot of renewable assets. Digital is part and parcel of our infrastructure strategy.
And so is digital half of it, or what's the kind of breakdown?
So about 20-25% of our assets are in digital.
Okay.
The other 20-25 tends to be in energy, and increasingly, as you know, Bill, energy and digital assets are all converging, and in fact, those electrons that originate from a plant go all the way into the semiconductors. One seamless play, and effectively, especially with AI and all these things, at the forefront is not connectivity, but actually producing those electrons.
Yeah, no, it's actually, someone was joking to me the other day saying it's no longer about finding the population to get close to with the internet, it's about finding power. And cheap power, right? Yeah. And it's the race for the location of the cheapest power for data centers, right? I mean, it's
and a grid that will accept you.
Yes.
Because lots of grids are pushing back and frankly do not want that heavy load given where grid architecture is.
Now, if you ever, just as, you know, we'll go off on a few tangents here today, but why not? Have you ever integrated the two portions? Have you built the power plant and the data center next to each other? Have you done this yet in sort of the integrated model?
So in Ireland, we have done that. We have an integrated model. We own, as you know, the utility in Ireland called Energia. And in Ireland, data centers are notoriously hard to permit. You know, I mean, between the community opposition, but also more importantly, the air grid opposition and the data center loads, it was increasingly getting difficult. So right in the center of Dublin, we have about 747 megawatts of power, and we integrated a rather large facility.
As you think about the Pacific and sort of what's going on there, obviously you just bought into RTI, right, which is your newest, and you've got Hutchison's assets. Correct. What's your Asian strategy? How does it all fit together?
Look, I mean, I think Asia is a super exciting part of the world. If you think about the connectivity, there's a sheer volume of digital consumers, the number of smartphones, the growth. I think Asia is probably leading the pack in the sheer volume. The challenge in Asia is to deliver at a price point that works for the consumers, works for the telcos, works for the OTT. So it's both a volume and a rapid scale game. Traditionally, I think a lot of this of the compute and data centers came from offshore sites, whether it be Singapore or whether it be the West Coast. I think increasingly all that is getting localized. And I think, to be honest, the fiber network has not kept up in place, right? So it's still, the terrestrial network is still has prone to cuts. It's not of the same quality. And so for us, the challenge has been, which we are doing under different brands, Lightstorm and Hutchison and others, is how do you have a high quality redundant fiber network which is actually connects all the data centers but also connects the consumers as a neutral provider of fiber. Because as you know, we are not a telco.
Yeah.
We have telco license, but we're not a mobile provider.
Yeah. We'll sort of now start going towards the 202 course here. But as you think about fiber, though, I mean, as an investor, probably the most challenging sector to invest in, right? Because it's data centers, as we know, I think have been pretty easy to sort of get in, get out, make money, right? Even the fiber assets you're buying, both of them were essentially in Chapter 11, right?
Correct.
I mean, so you're buying them at 20 cents on the dollar, right? I mean, the question is, like with Lightstorm, is it possible to build a company, fiber, at today's fiber build prices and still make money?
Yeah. Look, it's an excellent question. So I think our value proposition is that we want to be neutral providers of fiber. So provide it, frankly, to the telcos, provide it to the OTTs, and not compete with any one of them. I think fiber, you correctly pointed out, has a lot of sunk investments, and a lot of investors, frankly, haven't done that well.
Yeah.
Return on assets for many telcos, including fiber companies, have been abysmally low, and the assets have not been utilized, right? So utilization levels have been low. So I think for us, for Lightstorm, it's native. So we built it from ground up. We started the company and built it. I think in GTT's case, we bought something out of distress, and Hutchison was a complex carve out from a mobile operator who was also underutilizing their fiber. I think there is a round of pricing that needs to settle down at values where the ecosystem can work. But for sure, what does not work is owning your own fiber and you being the sole tenant. I think that model is one which slowly I think the industry is realizing is probably not the greatest model. And I think a shared network is probably a right use of capital. And if you are able to bring on more tenancy on it, no different than a tower,
Yeah.
the return on assets does better.
Yeah.
And that's how the ecosystem can thrive.
You have a leg into China now. Obviously, you're in the U.S. In your view, how do you see? I mean, it's for many. It's especially they come to this conference and are parts of the PTC challenges. How do you deal with the China-U.S. conflict? People are upset and told that they can't actually sell services if they have Huawei gear inside their data centers, so there's a lot of protectionism that's happening. Do you think it's getting better? Do you think it's getting worse? What's your
look? It's very unfortunate. I mean, you ran companies where it wasn't this polarized. So today we live in a very polarized world. We of course are neutral, parties, and in some sense our first and primary duty is a fiduciary duty to the pension holders and the savers who have invested with us, right? So within law, we act according to the law that we are faced with, but we primarily are fiduciary carriers, right? So and for us, it's very important to preserve that capital. It is very difficult today between the conflict between the two great powers on how business is to navigate that. Having said that, we keep advocating, and the good news is almost every government in the world is a proponent of infrastructure build. So if there is commonality, frankly, between the Democrats and the Republicans, or the East and the West, or growth markets and the developed markets, is generally infrastructure. Right? Everybody wants more. Everybody wants it affordable, and I think connecting those great, swaths of people and cultures is a huge part of how, frankly, the world can come together. So we are a big proponent of making sure that happens, even though maybe two sides don't see eye to eye.
Yeah, I think the challenge and for us, and I think as an industry, is that we for years have actually used, we've had common standards, right?
Yes.
So communications, it was IP protocols, you had ways of dealing with spectrum, so everyone built the same gear with the same protocol so that your tower could actually talk to whether it was a Chinese built or American built, it didn't matter, right? And same thing with your phones. But now you're getting to a point where there's sort of a separation, right? And so, I mean, as you were alluding to earlier, I mean, the best situation in these infrastructures is to share it, But
Yes.
we're essentially, aren't we heading towards a world that may have two different builders of infrastructure that may not actually talk to each other at the end of the day?
Yeah, look, I mean, may very well happen. We went through a decade of globalization and convergence, and I think for the last n number of years, we are going to a much more polarized world and separation of standards. In the end, it's unfortunately the consumer that pays, right? Because the economies of scale that you could get if everybody standardized is very different than what you would get if everybody, you know, has his own unique set in standards there. But I think I remain an optimist, so I do believe that eventually humans have an innate ability to communicate, to get along, and to prosper. Most human beings, whether you're in China or in the US, you want your family to do well, your kids to grow well, and so those basic human needs are common. That's what unites us. And so eventually that, I think, always will win. Now, we will go through periods where people don't see eye to eye, but, you know, I'm at least an optimist that eventually it will work out.
Gautam, thank you very much for joining us here at Digging into the Future, and welcome to your first PTC. And,
Thank you, Bill. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.